The fact of the matter was that AI became like the tool that we've always wanted as marketers. This is the future. Everybody's still scared. When I saw it, I was just like, man, you guys got 6 months. You have 6 months to pick this up. Like, I'm not going to waste 100 hours on something that's not going to make money. I don't want your input. You don't know anything about marketing. And I'm like, what are you doing? I think that the faultiness and why marketing has gone downhill is because
Hi, and welcome to the 91 Day Success Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan, and today I've got with me Mark de Grasse. Mark and I Mark, it was, I'm guessing, about almost 2 months ago when we were down in Cancun, both speaking at an AI event down there. I wanted to bring Mark on the show to share some of his expertise, get his story, and understand more about what he does. Mark's got an amazing past and is just incredibly talented when it comes to AI. So, Mark, instead of me telling all about what you do, why don't you tell everybody that if they don't know who you are, your background, tell us a little bit about yourself and especially what you're focused on right now.
Sure. I've been doing marketing for about 20 years now in a whole bunch of different capacities. And what I've done is actually gotten experience at every kind of level of marketing, from like the, small business executor, actually built a brand and then sold it to a company called Onnit 100% organically, which is kind of what launched me into marketing. And then had an agency. And then I was the president. And during this time, I was a fractional CMO multiple times, worked as the president of digitalmarketer.com. And then now I founded a new business called AI Branding Academy, where we're really trying to teach people how to do traditional marketing and branding executed through AI tools. So it's more of a practical approach, but the gist of it is that I think we're returning to a time of brands mattering, your product and service mattering, and your ability to actually retain customers for the long term mattering more than ever. So that's what I'm doing now.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. It's one of the reasons I'm excited to have you on the podcast is, like you, I've spent the last decade plus in digital marketing. I've seen a lot of changes, but I also believe, and we talked a little bit about this down in Cancun, but I also believe that we're going back to a time when branding really is important and your brand reputation is important, because people are sick and tired of just getting all the ads. And yes, sometimes that works. But at the end of the day, we want to connect with a brand. We want to be part of a community. We want to do that. And I, like you, believe that AI is just a tremendous way to leverage experience and skill in order to allow a good digital marketer to be great. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that transition that you made, especially, I know great job on Digital Marketer. Obviously, that's where I originally found you, and it's spent a lot of time following you there and making that sale to Onnit. That's amazing. But talk a little bit, what caused the transition from that into your current approach, where you're really focused again now on the Branding Academy?
It's been a journey because, for me, AI was like the realization of all my dreams in regards to like how computers should work. So a lot of people are kind of saying it, be like, oh, the Terminator. I'm like, no, this is exactly how we've always wanted computers to function. We didn't want to be, app switchboard operators, and we didn't want to be data processors, and we didn't want to, we're just not good at that too. And so when I look back, and I've been a huge sci-fi fan since I was a child. I used to listen to like the Green Hills of Earth on tape when I was like 7. But all these instances that I saw, kind of be obsessed with the hard sci-fi genre, was like 1,000 instances of AI. And that's all I saw. So I saw like, oh my gosh, this is like what every AI, every sci-fi writer has ever wanted, which is the ability to talk to a computer, have it do the grudge work so that you can do the fun stuff, which is the creativity, the relationships, the connections. Like, that's what humans are good at. And we're terrible at all the stuff that AI can use. A couple of years ago, when I kind of really got heavy into AI, I actually tried some tools like Jasper and Synthesia like 4 or 5 years ago, and it never really clicked. I was like, I'm an early adopter of things, but I'm not a super early adopter. So I like to wait and see like, hey, what's going to be around, what's actually useful, goes beyond the hype. Because, whenever you see AI tools, it's always like, oh, this is going to solve all the problems in the world in 10 seconds. I'm like, no, it's not. And if it is, then I'm going to be locked into your process and your rules and how you want me to operate with your tool. And then I'm going to be dependent on you. And I'm not interested in that, because I'm done with subscriptions, that type of subscription model. So when you got like ChatGPT came up and ChatGPT got good, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually, and it used to be better, honestly, because I remember.
I agree with you entirely.
entire books, and you could ask it like complicated questions. It's just, oh man, it's just amazing the amount of stuff you could do. And I think we'll get back to that once we deal with this whole processing and electricity capacity issue we're having. The fact of the matter was that AI became like the tool that we've always wanted as marketers. And people think that's like, oh, it's just doing your job for you. I'm like, no, it's doing the week of research I would have done for an article in seconds. It's doing the email I wanted to write to that person, but just couldn't get around to focusing enough to do a good job on it. And now I can do it in seconds. And it organizes information, and it just had all these practical uses. And so once I saw that, I was like, this is the future. Anybody who's not jumping on board to this train will eventually. And then by the time they do it, AI will have progressed so far that you're not even going to understand what's happening. So I kind of saw it as like this huge opportunity to learn a new technology, employ it in a practical sense that actually improved my capabilities instead of replaced them. And I think everybody's going to have to use it. It's going to be like saying, I'm on the internet. Like, oh, yeah. I use AI. Like, yeah, you better.
Exactly. Well, it reminds me a lot. You're younger than I am, but I remember when the PC came on stage. I was just getting into the workforce and PCs were coming out. And of course, I'm just getting out of college. So I'm excited about PCs and all the things you can do. And I was really into spreadsheets in particular, and the fact that, the things you could do with a spreadsheet that would just take forever when you were working on a ledger or trying to figure things out. And I remember then people would come and go, I'm not going to do it that way. I've been doing it this way for 20 years. I'm not going to do that. Those people were fine for a year or two, maybe 3. I think we're seeing that same thing with AI. I think we're seeing a lot of people going, I'm not ready to go there yet. What I'd love to hear from you, Mark, is I'd love your perspective on where we're at on the wave. I hear two sides of it. I hear people saying, wow, we're just, things are still new. We're still getting started. There's so much opportunity. And then I hear other people on the other end of going, hey, man, if you're not on it already, you've missed it. I know I've got my opinions, but I'd love to hear your perspective about that. Where are we at, especially if you've got business people now listening that have not fully embraced it? Is it too late?
Oh, no. We're actually still super early. I actually tell this to like all the workshops I host. I'm just kind of like, guys, you're doing a great job. Like nobody's taking this step yet. Everybody's still scared. And we're almost at the turning point in terms of people. Like there's probably half of people are into it, half of people aren't. But I think we're starting to see the trend go to like, okay, more than 50% of people now understand like you're going to have to use this. Stop fighting it. A similar kind of battle is still going on with like electric cars, where it's kind of like, oh, electric cars are stupid. Oh, they light on fire. I'm like, literally there's explosions going on under your hood, and you're talking about an electric car being on fire. Anyways, but with AI, it's happening faster. Like I think the adoption is happening faster, mainly because you could make it so practical and useful almost instantly. For a lot of techniques, even within marketing, you're like, hey, I'm going to show you how to do SEO. And it's like, okay, let me go through like believing it's going to work and then getting into the process. And then 6 to 12 months later, yay, you're an SEO believer. But with AI, it's like, no, here, just take your information. Okay, where are you trying to sell? Plug it into here, and it'll just produce your whole customer journey for you in 2 seconds. Or, oh, hey, I need an email welcome series. Like, okay, just put in what you want, brand voice, specs on what you're going to be promoting. Boom, email series in 20 minutes. And so with AI, I think it's being adopted a lot faster than other technologies, but still slower than I thought. Because when I saw it, I was just like, man, you guys got 6 months. You have 6 months to pick this up before it's way past what you can understand. And then everything's going to be taken over and all the jobs are gone. But luckily for everybody, it didn't happen that fast. So I'm kind of saying like, I still believe that, but I think we're still like a year, 2 years from like, okay, the majority of people are doing it, even if in marketing, it's most of us.
Understood. Well, I do think marketers are picking it up sooner because it's a natural inclination. I, like you, I remember starting to use ChatGPT and thinking, man, this is what I've always wanted. I've got the concepts. I've got the ideas. I know the roadmap I want to follow. I just don't want to lock myself in a room for a few hours and write all this content, or a few days and write all this content. And now I don't have to. And I didn't really have to spend any more time going back and forth with a writing team because, as you know, finding those writing teams was a nightmare. Getting them to be consistent was even worse. Once you found somebody, then you got them trained, then they went to do something else. And so keeping that consistent was hard. And that's one of the things I loved about AI was the ability as a marketer to go in and go, all right, once I've trained you and got you working, I'm going to get very predictable outputs. And predictable, not as in boring, but as in spot on exactly where I want it to be. And not copy paste ready to go, but 90 to 95% of the way there. If I can feed it right up front, have it do the heavy lifting in the middle, now all I have to do is my final editing before it goes live. And people are like, well, it's no good if you got to do final editing. And I'm like, but have you ever have you ever not final edited anything? I mean, that's just, it's crazy in my mind. One of the things I love that you're doing, you just recently, when we met in Cancun, it just launched your first issue of your magazine. And I was actually just looking at that this morning. I see your second issue's out. You're sharing some things in there. For those people listening to the podcast, and I hope there aren't a ton, but I know there are, that are still really wondering, how do I use AI? I noticed in issue number 2 in particular, you're sharing some amazing prompts, kind of here's a scenario, here's some prompts to work through that. How do people get connected with you in the magazine, and talk to us a little bit about why maybe you're doing that? What's behind your impetus there? Hopefully, I'm guessing to feed people and get them excited, but I'd love to hear from your perspective.
Oh, you know what? It actually mixes a couple of things that you talked about, which was the consistency piece, and then the ability to do projects I wouldn't have done if I had to spend the amount of time I knew it would take. And so the magazine, I actually designed most of it in a weekend, and that's why I put it out there, because I'm just like, this magazine that I put out, I designed it in a weekend, and then inputting and editing probably took another like 2 weeks. But you're talking about maybe like 10 hours versus 100 to 200 hours to do like what that would have taken me if I did it 10 years ago. And so I did the magazine specifically to be like, hey, well, it does a few things, but one of them is just like, hey, look what you can do with, and how I generated the design was actually just designing the logo. I took the logo, designed it, I fed it into ChatGPT and said, hey, analyze this logo for these branding elements. And then I took those branding elements and was able to design the whole magazine, make it really attractive and consistent. And I didn't have to do all the work that that design would have taken, if I did it myself. So it was kind of like a demonstration of like, hey, here's what you can do. Then again, I wouldn't have done it if I couldn't do it that fast, because, it's who knows what it's going to do for me. Like, I'm not going to waste 100 hours on something that's not going to make money. So that was awesome. And then the other big feature was that I realized, because I've always done magazines, it's actually what I sold to On It was actually a magazine and like 10,000 pieces of content. What I realized with that was that I could now not just produce an article or a video like telling people some cool tips, I could actually hand them a tool, a custom tool to help them execute those tips. And so if you look at the magazine, it'll be like, how I gave up alcohol. And then I kind of told the story, my methodology that I used. And then I literally made a GPT that's like, hey, do you want to do the same thing? And you could go to the GPT and it'll tell you the steps, basically you answer a few questions and it says, here's how you could mimic this process yourself. And it's customized to them, what they like to drink, how much they drink, their time frame for wanting to give it up. And now I just took a piece of content that would have been hard to implement and made it easy, like instant implementation. So with the magazine, I'm just trying to demonstrate like, hey, here's how much cool stuff you could do quickly. And then my next step is to launch the AI branding magazine, which is going to be essentially the same thing, but now I'll invite people in to write, like, Jonathan, definitely need some articles from you. Hopefully with some cool prompts or GPTs, and then just to get people excited, and what I found with magazines too is because I was thinking about book, everybody has a book, and I was like, man, people hand me books all the time, and I will read them and I will review them, but I'm like, man, you just handed me like a long assignment.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you. I'm glad I'm not the only one that's felt that way.
Oh, yeah. It's like you're so proud of your friend for doing it, but then you're also like, oh, man, now I got to read another book. I read a lot of books. But with the magazine, I was like, man, a magazine, like you just hand it to somebody. They could just glance through the pages. You get all those impressions. You could link it. You could put QR codes everywhere, put your advertisements in there. And then now when they're on their way back from that expo where you told people about it, they can now flip through it, use their phone to access the codes. And now your organic traffic just went through the roof, and you just handed somebody a magazine. Like, it's incredible.
No, and I love the way you did that. And you mentioned something in there, I think, that was super important to me. You did the magazine because you were able to leverage AI to do it faster. One of the things I've noticed as a marketer, and I'll admit I've got ADD, so fast is important to me, because if I don't, it slips away and I've forgotten about it. So I've always been a speed to implementation fan. But in my mind, that's actually one of the really secret powers of AI, is it really helps out with speed to implementation. So we can either fail faster, which as businesses in them is not a bad thing to do, because I don't want to, like you said, I don't want to put hundreds of hours into something and then find out, oh man, that's not going to work. I'd rather put 10 hours in and go, nope, that's a bad idea. But it also then allows me to do that instead of in 10 hours, maybe in 5 or 6. Sometimes for marketing campaigns, we can do an A/B test that would have literally taken us a week to do or 2 weeks to do 2 years ago in an hour. Well, now you can find out if it makes sense and it's worth doing some of that A/B testing, because in the old days when it's like, okay, yeah, maybe we've got an ABC test, but I don't really want to do any more because it's going to take too much time. There's not going to be enough difference. Well, now you can literally feed all of that into AI. Like you said, I love your comment, how you fed your brand for the magazine, the logo into AI, and now you have ChatGPT creating content and graphics based upon that. That consistency is now built in as long as it's trained well. So I love that. And I've got so many questions to go over with you, Mark. That leads me to another one. When we talk about training, creating avatars that actually have job duties to do. And I think this is a really burgeoning area in AI that a lot of people haven't really thought about. Can you talk to me a little bit about that from your perspective, and why do you think these avatars are so important?
Oh, the avatars, it's really an interaction tool, because I'm actually an HR major, and I've been executive at multiple firms, managed departments, and so I'm always thinking in terms of like, how are you going to implement this with people? Because we talk about scaling all day long and outsourcing to VAs all over the world and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, it comes down to you being able to hire and manage somebody. And if you can't do that effectively, then you're wasting money all over the place. And so this kind of, my background led me to believe that, hey, if you're not defining every element of your brand, how people should talk, how people should write, how you treat each other, your culture, your values, if you don't centralize this information, it still gets defined, but it gets defined by your managers and your employees and the consultants that you hire. And so once I realized that, I was like, we have to centralize everything. So what I did was it's called the brand pillars, are kind of the simplistic, brand elements we teach. There's 9 of them. Then you have your brand essentials, which is another few pieces. And then you have these really comprehensive style guides that cover your visual, your written, your community, your interactive, and your experiential elements of your brand. And the reason why I had to make them so comprehensive was because my theory is that if you can actually define all these things, then instead of you having to brainstorm when you have an upcoming PR event, or hey, you need to figure out onboarding for your employees, or hey, how should you actually structure the company itself? If you actually create all these parameters and put them into AI, now instead of you having to be super consistent and manage your brand harshly, you could just say, hey, this is a visual branding issue. I'm going to send this GPT that's powered by my brand elements to a contractor. And now the contractor, instead of talking to me and brainstorming and doing a bunch of extra steps, now I can just say, no, query this GPT. It has all my information. I agree with everything it does. Now we can move the process way faster. I'm not bringing in a bunch of goofballs from my team to muddy the waters and trying to, put their mark on it so that I keep paying them, which is, that's a whole different issue.
It's a reality in marketing. We've all seen that. I mean, yeah, it's talk about, again, another way to cut to the chase there. I love that.
Yeah. Well, and then what it also does, and this is because I've had a lot of clients, I was like, I don't want your input. You don't know anything about marketing. You don't know anything about branding. If it was a lawyer coming in here giving you advice on a contract, you wouldn't say like, that's great, but my niece likes pink, so we're going to use that instead. It's not there. But with marketing, everybody has input. And so I was thinking like, I really need the input of the person in charge, but I don't need that much input. I need the basis of what you're trying to achieve. And then you let me do my job as a marketing professional. And so that's where I kind of came up with this, like, no, let's define your brand. And then once I have that, we can stop talking, because you don't know anything. I do. And I actually got all the information I needed from you about your brand at the beginning. And now I'm just going to be consistent with what you're trying to achieve. So as a contractor, now your job just got like 100 times easier, because you're not dealing with this battle against the owner, battle against the head of marketing, battle against the social media manager that's doing so bad that they had to hire you. That's the reality of marketing.
It is, absolutely.
Get rid of all of it. Just stop it. And now we'll talk to AI instead.
I love it. So obviously we know you and I have a background in digital marketing, so we always go there when it comes to AI because it's just such a natural for us. But for those people that are not in that, you served as an executive, like you mentioned, at a number of other companies. What are some other areas that these avatars can serve them? I mean, can it help out in operation? Can it help out in logistics? Can it help out in, HR? What are your perspectives on that, Mark?
Oh, 100%. Because again, if it's not coming from the top, if you're not defining what you're doing from the top, it's being defined somewhere else. And so literally, once you establish your values, if you think like, okay, we set our core values, we set our vision, how can those two aspects apply to your onboarding procedure? You'd say like, okay, well, based on our values are teamwork, no independence, like we always help each other. And then you could list these things, like how much would those values be reflected in your onboarding if you just told it, if you just asked, like, hey, based on my company values, based on my company vision, I need to onboard a new assistant for the CFO. What are the values that I would need to onboard this assistant so that they understand our brand? And, I have a process that would take an HR professional like weeks, right? Maybe months to research the materials. Now you have like a branded procedure. And now instead of you just kind of like, oh crap, the intern starts on Monday. I didn't have time to put together, like, where's the job description? I need to do something. It's like, no,
yes,
brand values, job description, onboarding timeline within 2 weeks to be effective. Boom, you got a thing. So yeah, it's once you define these basic parameters, like all of it is done. You don't have to think anymore about dumb stuff like onboarding procedures. I mean, not that's dumb.
No. I get it, but it's things that take a lot of time that have, I don't want to say they don't have value, but that can be done. That's one of the things I love about AI, Mark, is its ability to do so much of that heavy lifting. You'd mentioned earlier about the ability to go out and do research for us and come back. It's one of the things I absolutely love utilizing AI tools to do is, I did it for our interview today, even though you and I had met and talked. I'm like, okay, I got to prep. Normally prep 2 years ago would have taken me an hour to 2 hours, maybe longer, going over websites, looking at things, looking at your LinkedIn profile, looking here. Now I literally can go out and I can use tools like Perplexity and other tools to go out and say, look, I'm interviewing Mark today. Here's what, again, like you said, it already knows who I am. It knows who my podcast is. It knows who my audience is. Based on that, how do you think we could conduct a great interview that would build up Mark, but also add value to our audience? And literally within minutes, I had a number of great suggestions. When you're like me and you don't work off a question list anyway, it's turned that prep work from hours into literally 10 to 15 minutes. And probably better because I'm picking up on things that I would have forgotten in the midst of those hours of research. And now they're in front of me as bullet points. And I can go, hey, Mark, let's talk about this, or let's bring this up. So yeah, just huge value. I love that.
Yeah, well, that's really what it's about. It's something that you're doing that's effective. You have to do, and you know how long it takes. So usually I tell people, I'm like, anything you have a procedure for, that's the first step in terms of like, how can you use AI to do this? Instead of what a lot of people do, where it's just like, I need an onboarding process. Give me an onboarding process. And that's really the gist of, using AI in a good way and bad way is, the training. And then, like you said several times, the consistency. Because really with marketing, that's what it's like 99% about. Like, how often can you yell the same message in somebody's face for them to recognize you? Because that's how long it takes. It could take 500 impressions, before somebody's
exactly.
like, I've seen that before. It's like, oh. And the fact of the matter is, we've all wanted to get to this level of branding. Like, why would you not want to make an impression with every single action of your business? It was just not possible because it would just take too much work. Even if you had like a full-time, just fanatical brand manager, for them to be able to implement everything, like, for example, like your customer service emails, like let's say that, hey, you want to reflect the brand voice in your customer service emails, but you have 50 people working customer service. You're not going to train all them. And even if you did, they're going to get tired and lazy and maybe mad at you.
Yes.
And so what you could say is basically like, hey, anything you're going to send to a customer, you have to run through our customer care GPT. It's going to evaluate what you're writing. It's going to add in our little buzzwords and our cool terms that we like to say. And then all of a sudden you went from like just, Joe Schmo brand to like Disney. and people, they don't realize they're seeing it, but people recognize that.
Well, I was going to say subconsciously, that really brings us full term to where we were starting when you started talking about how much brand matters. And now with AI, we have the ability to do things that used to be reserved for companies like Disney, where they were spending untold millions of dollars to make sure that their brand was on target. When now the reality is, a solopreneur working from home, providing value, can do that exact same, I don't want to say exact same, but almost the same level, and really separate themselves from all their competition. Because like you said, your customer may not realize what you're doing, but when it comes to time to choose to work with you again, or to recommend you to a friend, or to choose you even that first time, if they already know, like, and trust you, that's what's going to make all the difference. I mean, I give a prime example. I'm in the process of buying a new vehicle, and I'm going to buy an incredibly exciting minivan of all things, but that's all right.
I love minivans.
Family vehicle. I don't mind them either. And we're debating what to do. And you know what? It didn't take a very long debate, because I've owned a number of Hondas over the years, and I love my Hondas. And as a result, we looked at it, and it's like, okay, I guess we're going to buy a Honda Odyssey. I'm not buying a Honda Odyssey because I know it's the absolute best, but because I know the brand, I trust the brand, I trust I'm going to get what I want. And again, that's always been available for a Honda or a Toyota or a GM or a Dodge or a Chevy, but it hasn't been available to the guy on Main Street or whoever the regional competitor, because it simply took too much to do that. And now, you've got an immense following. I've got a great following. When we do that and we're consistent about it, AI lets us amplify our skills so that we can be that brand that's known, that's liked, and that's trusted already. Talk to me, Mark, from your perspective. Somebody listening to the podcast going, okay, I use ChatGPT, I play around with it, I do this and that, but man, I like this idea of branding. I really, that resonates with them. They know the importance for their organization to do that. What types of things should they be looking at as an owner to try to make sure that they're getting that brand on target and then getting it shared with their team and their vendors and everybody else so they can create that Walt Disney type experience?
It's again, it just goes back to consistency. It's, hey, you have to sit down and you have to define a few things, and it has to be done by the owner. A lot of times, and I've heard business owners talk about this, like, oh yeah, sometimes we sit down with the whole, company, and we kind of ask for everybody's dreams and visions. And I'm like, what are you doing? There's no way that you can implement them. And then essentially what you're doing when you fail to define any aspect of your business is you create a new brand. And you see this especially with marketing projects, where it's like, hey, we need the website. Let's go ahead and invent a brand new brand instead of just reviewing how we've done things for the last 10 years. Or, hey, we need a flyer. Or, hey, we need a banner. Like, just this basic stuff. You end up having, some intern go to Canva and just grab some random template with like the wrong colors and fonts and stylistic elements. And you're just like, oh my gosh, like, not only did you not make that as effective as it could have been if you were just consistent with the brand, you just communicated a whole nother brand, which is taken away. So I tell people, I'm like, sit down, we call it the brand pillars. And so the brand pillars are your brand name, brand slogan, brand summary, brand avatar, customer avatar, core values, core offer, and two others that I forgot where I was in the list.
That's all right. You remembered more of them than I would have. That's great, Mark. That's fantastic.
So if you create these, and this is where the AI part comes in, because it'll walk you through the process where you could make your vision quantifiable, you can make your brand name reflect the elements, and then you can make your slogan reflect the elements that aren't communicated through your brand name. So there's a philosophy with all of it, but what you're generating is essentially, I call it the soul of your brand, where it's like, okay, now you know what you are, who you serve, why you're here. So let's now take that and just project it by having people query this thing that's powered by these things. And now you could just say, hey, to stay on brand, just make sure you ask this GPT before you implement something, because it'll tell you whether it's on brand or not.
I think so often as owners in particular, we get busy. There's so much going on. I don't have time to figure that out. But now figuring that out is one, as you mentioned, it's just a matter of getting it set up. And now with a custom GPT or a Claude project or whatever you want to use, I know there's so many different ways you can custom train it, whether you're using ChatGPT, Claude, Poe, Typing Mind, you name it. There's a gazillion options. But we literally can get it to the point that now we can empower our team through a great SOP to go, okay, once this is done, I need this member of the team to just run it through this GPT and make sure it's on brand. And if not, I need the send it back and fix it. Those are things that there wasn't enough time to do in the past, and there wasn't the ability to train our team well enough. But now that owner can do that by creating that brand, creating that GPT, and then providing that out to their team. I absolutely love that. I love where you're going.
It goes even farther, because the fact of the matter is that the owner changes too. The owner might be on cloud nine
Guilty as charged.
now, and the next quarter, things are going rough. Like, I'm just kind of negative right now. And now I'm going to make a bunch of decisions based on that. So AI even improves that situation, because now, how you manage your company isn't dependent on your mood, which is going to be variable and all over the place. It's like, no, it's not appropriate for me to do, make these big brand decisions right now because I'm in a bad place. And so now you can say, no, we said it. We agreed on it. So now we can move forward. And now it's the person who has the most at stake. It's their vision and it's their values. And they're the ones that'll, make sure everybody else does it too.
Oh, yeah. It reminds me of one of my marketing mentors, used to, much older than I, but retired now, but did billboards for many years. And he always talked about the fact that, when they did the billboards and they put the billboards together, they would always find out where the owner lived and the route the owner took to work. And I'm like, okay, why did that matter if you're doing billboards? He goes, because we learned something really early on, and it's related to what you're saying. It's a little different, but if the owner saw the billboard, the campaign was successful because it resonated with the owner. If the owner didn't see the billboard, the campaign, regardless of the numbers, was an absolute failure. And I think what you're talking about with AI is so important here, because it allows that owner's perspective to be easily shared throughout the organization, to be easily disseminated throughout that branding. And let's face it, especially for many of us, our owner's vision, our owner's values, our owner's personality still are part of the reason that company exists and how it succeeds. And so the ability to do that is amazing.
Most of the time when you see these projects go south, it's mainly because the consultant or the agency or the marketer took too much control and said, hey, I know what you need to do. And so I'm just going to push this through. And the owner might be like, oh, I know it's effective. And I know we just 5x'd our revenue, but I really didn't like that we did that. And so you're fired. And so for the marketer, you could actually avoid that, because you could say like, no, I got your vision. I understand the values. And now I'm going to implement exactly as you say, using the professional skills that I have in order to do this. And you don't even understand anyways. And so it actually helps on both sides, because then the marketer isn't feeling like, oh, I got to pick up the slack because this person doesn't know what the heck they're talking about, and I'm going to make this work anyways. And then you have this conflict and everybody gets fired.
That brings me to my next question, which is tools. I can hear people listening to the podcast right now going, okay, this is great. What tools do I need? From your perspective, Mark, there's a gazillion tools. One of my problems as a guy that's into AI with ADD is I'm always like, ooh, that's a cool tool. That's a cool tool. Admittedly, at the end of the day, I find most of them don't live up to their hype. There are some notable exceptions. But from your perspective, you've been doing this for a long time. You've been working with AI. Where do you recommend that business owners look when it comes to the tools that they should be using, the AI tools in particular, or engines that are driving this?
You know what? I have a few attributes I try to incorporate to all my decisions, where it has to be practical, it has to have some longevity, and it has to be versatile. And so with a lot of that actually eliminates a ton of these kind of specialized apps where it's like, hey, you need a 30-second clip, cut up and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, sort of, but I want to do way more than that. And so I'm it has to be something that's been kind of established and kind of universal. So I'm restricted to just things that usually a big brand, something that's been around for a while, and then something that's versatile enough and that isn't restricting me into some system that I don't necessarily want to take part of. So ChatGPT, super versatile. Its performance is up and down, but it's still the most consistent. And I do think that the GPT store is going to be like the gold standard for how to share AI apps.
Agreed.
So
absolutely.
It's going to be like the iTunes, the Apple store of AI. And so I'm like, have to do that. Then you have Perplexity, which you mentioned. And Perplexity has been very consistent, easy to use, perfect Google replacement for finding information and making sure that your stats you generate with ChatGPT are valid. That's how I use that. There's also illicit.org. And this is one that less people know about, but it's an index of like published papers. And so a lot of times with any online research that you do, you're always like, I'm pulling this off of a top 50 statistics about this thing list. And then when you start to click on the sources for that, it takes you in a loop where you get back to the original article and you're like, okay, that's not a source. So Elicit allows you to justify what you're saying using published papers. That's huge. Then I use HeyGen for video. HeyGen, you can use it for translation. I literally did a presentation in Colombia, and I started out with me speaking Spanish in a video, and they came out, and I was like, I don't speak Spanish. And they kind of watched the whole event. You can create cool avatars. For me, like I want to have multiple people because I'm an organization, but I have to get them in here and do all this stuff. So now I could actually generate influencer content without actually needing people, which is huge. Claude is huge. Claude has become my go-to source for like written content. ChatGPT tends to get really repetitive, really cliche. Even if you tell it like, hey, don't use cliche analogies. It's like,
exactly.
Yeah, and you're just like, it doesn't listen. So Claude is now way more consistent, but I still like the basicness of ChatGPT because sometimes I don't need a flowery whatever. I just want to see the 10 types of brand voice that most big brands fall into. And that's like, oh, okay, here you go. Because I want the default. And that's why I tell you the advantage with AI is that people say, oh, yeah, I could be biased. I'm like, you know who's biased? Every single person on this planet. That's who's biased.
Thank you. Oh, I tell that to everybody. Yes.
Yeah, I'm like, AI is an average of everybody's perception. It's even if it's wrong, it's still you're getting the average of everybody. And that's way better than me even coming up with my idea because my idea is just my idea. So those are the basics. I have some other, few ones, but I use those like 95% of the time.
No, a great list overall. And I'm with you. I think, while I've tried out tons of these specialty apps, there's very, very few of them that I use. If they do, it's generally because it's been well vetted and it works in a specialty purpose that I happen to need, but it's not a mainstream app in that case. The other thing, like you, I've experienced, ChatGPT, I'm not always thrilled with their performance, but one thing they do amazingly well is their custom GPT store right now. There is not an easier way to create and share that type of information than there is through the GPT store. And because everybody in the world has a GPT account, it's really easy to share that with anybody that needs access to that custom GPT, like you said, that's been trained as your avatar, as your brand voice, or any other aspect that you're doing. So no, I really appreciate you sharing that.
Well, and so what we do, I mean, just with the GPTs, for example, is we have like a set framework for creating these GPTs using the AI branding framework. And so literally, if I need a GPT, like I wrote an article and I'm like, oh, this article could actually use, a way to implement. I can create that GPT in like 10 minutes. And then now I have a custom asset. And now I can find out if that GPT and those features could actually be useful and maybe a bigger application at some point. So there's a million functions to it. It's super helpful.
We're called the 91 Day Success Podcast. And part of that's because so many business people that are listening to us are always thinking about there's a new product, a new service, there's a new something I can do. And I love asking. And by the way, if you're listening, I did not prep Mark for this. So he didn't know this was coming. There's no right or wrong answers. But Mark, how would you leverage AI today if you were going to start a new company or you're advising somebody starting a new company? How would you leverage AI to help build that company to become and create some consistent revenue in the first 91 days or first 3 months? Any thoughts on what you might do?
You know what? I would just start with assessing your company right now. And all you have to do that is go into ChatGPT and say, here's my objective over the next 90 days. How can I utilize AI in order to accomplish that, given that this is my size business, this is my industry, this is my target market? And then it'll just tell you. It's incredible. You can even say, if you want a little, add some spice to it, just say, analyze my top 3 competitors within this space and implement or help me implement ways that made them successful or the obvious ways why they're successful. And then all of a sudden you have probably a better marketing plan and business plan than you've ever written. And it could take you 5 minutes.
Such great advice. And it does work. I just launched a new offering that I do. And I did exactly what you did. Literally from my phone, I went into ChatGPT and said, all right, here's what it is. Here's what I want to offer. Here's the value it brings. I want to tease it for 7 days on social media. If you want to know what it is, go watch my social media because I'm teasing it right now. And I said, based on what I want to do, give me 3 posts a day for 7 days. And what it came up with was, again, 90 to 95% of the way there. And I did it on my phone in about 3.5 minutes. And now I can just take what it gave me and go, okay, I want to change a few words when I post this. Not only am I not doing it versus just thinking about it, which is what I would have done 2 years ago, wouldn't have got it done, wouldn't have implemented it, but also it's now in front of me. So, today my morning got messed up due to some medical issues, not a big deal, but got totally messed up. I came back and I'm like, oh, I need to do this first post for the day. I literally went in, grabbed it out, copy, pasted, made a couple quick edits, uploaded an irrelevant image and posted it. And, yesterday that got me over 100 comments.
Wow.
My average social post that I put out doesn't get me that many. And I was able to do that within under a minute, literally. And that's a part I think is so exciting. Like you said, it may not be perfect, but it's probably better than any plan we've ever done thus far. And so why not embrace that and go with that improvement and the expeditious nature of it and run with it? So
love it. Yeah. Take action. That's the key.
Yeah. Well, Mark, people that are listening and they want to figure out how do they connect with you? How do they learn more? How do they find out more about your AI Branding Academy, your magazine, all the other things you're doing? What's the best way for them to reach out and connect with you, Mark?
LinkedIn personally is a good one. I do have my personal website, markdegrasse.com. You can find all my content there. And then for AI Branding Academy, just aibranding.academy is the website. And there's tons of free stuff. We have a free membership, and we're actually coming out with like a pro version that's going to have access to like 100 GPTs that we built around our frameworks. So that's going to launch pretty soon if people want to check that out.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I want to thank you for your time today, for joining me. I know your schedule is busier than mine and you got a gazillion things going on. So grateful that you had the opportunity to join us. And I want to encourage you guys, if anything that Mark's talked about has resonated with you, reach out. Mark's one of the real McCoys here. I mean, he knows what's going on. He's been involved in the industry, and he's not here to sell you a new piece of software every day. It seems like so many of the AI experts that I run into, Mark, I don't know about yourself, they're only AI experts in the fact that they're trying to sell you a piece of software. So apart from that, they don't seem to know much. So
my main goal is always to make people independent, where it's kind of like, you know what, I think the faultiness and why marketing has gone downhill is because people have said, like, how do I manipulate my audience into coming back all the time? And I'm like, no, your real value should be making them as independent as possible. And so they choose you when it's necessary instead of one of your competitors. But if you're not doing anything good, then they shouldn't.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to have you here today. Can't thank you enough. And everybody else, thanks for hanging out for the podcast. We love to have you here. Give us a thumbs up if you like what we're doing, and we'll see you on the other side. Thanks, everybody. Make it a great day. Bye-bye.